They say a mother's love is unconditional, but they never met Mireya Amani, whose hands held not a cradle but a weapon. In a rain-slicked alley behind a Korean grocery store, where neon signs bled red and blue across cracked pavement, 20-year-old Zuri knelt with her arms crossed over her chest, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. Above her, silhouetted against the artificial glow, stood the woman who gave her life, and had spent every day since trying to beat it back out of her. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of thick rope against wet concrete echoed through the narrow space like a countdown to catastrophe. Each strike sent tremors through Zuri's body, though the rope hadn't touched her skin yet. It didn't need to. Years of discipline had taught her that the anticipation was part of the punishment. "You worthless girl," Mireya hissed, her dark eyes narrowed to slits of pure rage. "You think you can embarrass me? Make me look weak?" Zuri's lips trembled, but no words came. What could she say? That she'd only asked for food? That she'd done nothing wrong? Her mother's fury needed no logic, no reason. It simply was, as constant as the rain, as inevitable as the neon lights that never slept. The rope rose again. And then, "That's enough." The voice cut through the rain like a blade through silk. "Low, calm, absolute." Zuri's wide eyes flickered toward the alley's entrance, where a figure emerged from the shadows with the quiet confidence of a man who'd never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. He was tall, Korean, dressed in a tailored black suit that somehow remained pristine despite the downpour. His jet black hair caught the neon glow as he moved forward, one hand raised in a firm, commanding gesture that froze Mireya mid-strike. Not a shout, not a plea, just a single raised hand, and the entire world seemed to halt. Kang Min-jae had arrived. The rope hung suspended in midair, trembling in Mireya's grip. She stood frozen, arm raised like a monument to cruelty, her breath coming in sharp bursts that misted in the cold night air. For a moment, Zuri thought time itself had stopped, that the universe had finally taken pity on her and pressed pause on this endless nightmare. But it wasn't mercy that had halted her mother's hand. It was him. The man in the black suit stood at the mouth of the alley like a shadow given form, the neon signs behind him creating a halo of electric light. Crimson red from the Korean barbecue restaurant, cold blue from the pharmacy, flickering gold from the pawn shop. The colors painted him in fragments, a sharp jaw here, a glint of watch there, the dangerous curve of his mouth caught between darkness and light. He didn't move, didn't need to. His presence alone was a command. "I said," Min-jae repeated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "That's enough." Mireya's face twisted, rage battling with something unfamiliar. Caution, perhaps, or the primal recognition that she'd stumbled into territory that didn't belong to her. "This is family business," she snarled, though her voice had lost its conviction. "You got no right." "I have every right." Min-jae took a single step forward, and somehow that one movement contained more threat than Mireya's entire violent display. The neon light shifted across his face, revealing the cold calculation in his eyes. "This is my street, my territory, and I don't tolerate noise." The word hung between them like a loaded gun. Zuri watched from her kneeling position as her mother's certainty crumbled. She'd seen Mireya face down landlords, social workers, even police officers with that same righteous fury. But this man, this stranger in his expensive suit and dangerous calm, made her mother look small. Powerless. Human. "Who are you?" Mireya demanded, but her grip on the rope had loosened. Min-jae's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Someone who's about to make you an offer you'd be stupid to refuse." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood between Zuri and her mother like a wall of tailored wool and controlled violence. Up close, Zuri could see the fine details. The way his knuckles were slightly scarred, the expensive leather of his shoes, the subtle bulge beneath his jacket that suggested he was never truly unarmed. "So," Min-jae said, his tone shifting to something almost conversational, almost pleasant. "Let's talk business. Your daughter for my money. Clean. Simple. Final." Mireya's eyes gleamed with sick understanding, and Zuri realized that her life was about to change hands like currency in the rain. Mireya's tongue darted across her lips like a serpent tasting opportunity. "And why would a man like you want a worthless girl like her?" Min-jae didn't even glance at Zuri. His eyes remained locked on Mireya, reading her the way a gambler reads marked cards. "My reasons are my own. Your answer is simple, yes or no." The rain intensified, drumming against the metal dumpsters and fire escapes above. Water ran in rivulets down the alley walls, carrying the city's grime toward the gutters. Zuri's knees ached against the concrete, but she didn't dare move. She'd learned long ago that stillness was survival. 50,000, Mireya said, her voice sharp with greed. She's cost me that much in food and trouble over the years. You want her? Pay the debt. Zuri's heart sank. 50,000. An impossible sum. A fantasy number pulled from her mother's spite. This stranger, whoever he was, would laugh, walk away, leave her kneeling in the rain with a mother whose rage had just been stoked to new heights. But Min-jae merely reached into his jacket. The leather wallet that emerged was understated, expensive, the kind that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. He opened it with the same calm efficiency he'd shown since arriving, his fingers moving through bills with practiced ease. Hundreds. All hundreds. He counted them out in the neon-lit darkness, each crisp note a nail in the coffin of Zuri's old life. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. He held the stack out to Mireya, who snatched it with trembling hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. She'd expected negotiation, argument, perhaps violence. Not compliance. Not this casual display of power that made $50,000 seem like pocket change. This covers her debt, Min-jae said, his voice dropping to something colder, harder. Blood and gold. Paid in full. She is no longer your concern, your property, or your punching bag. He stepped closer to Mireya, and despite the height difference, despite her fury, she actually stepped back. And if I ever see you near her again, this money will be the least expensive thing you've lost. Do we understand each other? Mireya's jaw clenched. For a moment, Zuri thought she might actually refuse, might throw the money back and claim some twisted maternal right. But greed and fear are powerful motivators, and her mother was nothing if not a survivor. She's yours, Mireya spat, shoving the cash into her coat. Good riddance. She turned and walked away, her footsteps splashing through puddles, her silhouette swallowed by the neon maze of the city. Not once did she look back. Not once did she hesitate. 20 years of motherhood, sold for paper and threats. The alley fell silent except for the rain. Min-jae finally looked down at Zuri, his expression unreadable. Can you stand? She nodded, though her legs felt like water. Then stand, he said quietly. You don't kneel anymore. Not for anyone. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower that pierced the city's smog-choked sky like a shard of ice. Zuri stood in the marble entryway, dripping rainwater onto floors so polished she could see her reflection. A trembling, bedraggled ghost of a girl who didn't belong in a place where even the air smelled expensive. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like frozen starlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawled below, a glittering web of lights and shadows that seemed both beautiful and threatening. This way. Min-jae's voice cut through her awe. He'd shed his wet jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He moved through the space with the ease of a king in his castle, expecting her to follow. She did, her worn shoes squeaking against the marble. He led her through a corridor lined with dark wood panels and abstract art that probably cost more than her mother's entire apartment building. Past a living room filled with leather furniture. Past a kitchen gleaming with steel and granite. Until finally he stopped at a door. Yours, he said simply, pushing it open. The bedroom beyond was larger than any space Zuri had ever inhabited. A massive bed dominated the center, dressed in charcoal linens that looked untouched. A private bathroom. A closet. Windows that offered a dizzying view of the neon sprawl below. And on the nightstand, a covered plate still steaming. Eat, Min-jae said. Then shower. There are clothes in the closet. Sleep if you can. He paused at the doorway, his hand on the frame. The lock works from the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer. Zuri stared at him, searching for the trap, the catch, the hidden cruelty. But his expression remained neutral, almost businesslike. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why what? Why give me a lock? Why tell me to use it? Something flickered across his face, recognition maybe or understanding. Because you've spent your whole life in cages you couldn't escape. This one, at least, you can control. He turned to leave, then stopped. Tomorrow we'll discuss the rules. Tonight, just rest. The door closed softly behind him. Zuri stood alone in the velvet cage, listening to the silence. A a silence without screaming, without threats, without the sound of rope against flesh. Slowly, carefully, she approached the nightstand and lifted the cover from the plate. Rice, grilled meat, vegetables seasoned with sesame and garlic. A small bowl of soup that smelled like home, though not the home she'd known, some other, better version that existed only in dreams. Her hands shook as she picked up the chopsticks. Hey, quick question. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you're invested in Zuri's story, hit that subscribe button and like this video so we can get this story to a wider audience. Your support means everything. Now, back to the story. The doctor arrived at dawn, carrying a leather medical bag and an expression of professional detachment that Zuri recognized immediately. The look of someone who'd seen too much to be shocked by anything. I'm Dr. Kim, the woman said in accented but fluent English, setting her bag on the bed. She was middle-aged, elegant, with silver streaking through her black hair. Mr. Kong asked me to examine you. May I? Zuri nodded, her body tense despite the soft mattress beneath her. She'd spent the night alternating between fitful sleep and staring at the locked door, half expecting it to burst open, half expecting this entire strange reality to dissolve like smoke. Dr. Kim worked in silence, her gloved hands gentle but thorough. She documented each bruise, each half-healed welt, each scar that mapped years of Maria's discipline across Zuri's skin. The doctor's face remained neutral, but her jaw tightened with each new discovery. Some of these are old, Dr. Kim murmured, applying antiseptic to a particularly nasty mark on Zuri's shoulder blade. Months old. Years even. Yes, Zuri whispered. And no one helped you? The question hung in the air like an accusation against the entire world. Zuri didn't answer. What was there to say? That neighbors had heard and ignored? That teachers had seen and looked away? That the system designed to protect her had filed her case under family matter? And moved on? Dr. Kim finished her examination and began packing her supplies. The physical wounds will heal. The rest. She paused, meeting Zuri's eyes. The rest takes time. Be patient with yourself. A knock at the door interrupted them. Come in, Dr. Kim called. Min-jae entered, and Zuri noticed he'd changed into dark slacks and a simple black shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. He carried a small tray, steam rising from a ceramic cup. How is she? He asked the doctor. She'll recover. I've left instructions for wound care and pain medication. Dr. Kim glanced at Zuri, then back to Min-jae. She needs rest. And patience. Understood. Min-jae nodded, dismissing the doctor with the same quiet authority he wielded over everything else. When they were alone, he approached the bed and set the tray on the nightstand. The scent hit Zuri immediately, familiar, impossible home. Rooibos tea. Red bush tea. The earthy, slightly sweet smell of the only comfort she'd known in childhood, before everything turned dark. You're East African, Min-jae said, not quite a question. I did some research. Thought you might. He gestured vaguely at the cup, and there, just there, was the first crack in his armor. Uncertainty. The awkwardness of a man who commanded empires, but didn't know how to comfort a broken girl. Zuri's throat tightened. Thank you. He nodded, already turning to leave. Mr. Kong. He paused at the door. Why are you doing this? Min-jae was quiet, his back still turned. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone should have done it a long time ago. Then he was gone, leaving Zuri alone with her scars and the tea that tasted like mercy. 3 days passed before Zuri left her room voluntarily. She'd spent the time healing, eating the meals that appeared outside her door like clockwork, and watching the city pulse below her window. The penthouse felt less like a cage and more like a fortress, isolating, yes, but safe in a way she'd never experienced. Still, curiosity eventually overrode caution. That's how she found herself wandering the corridor outside Min-jae's office, drawn by the murmur of voices speaking rapid Korean. Shipment arrives Tuesday. The docks, Pier 17. The door stood slightly ajar. Zuri knew she shouldn't look. Knew that witnessing whatever happened behind that door could shatter the fragile peace she'd found. But her feet carried her forward anyway, and she peered through the gap. Min-jae sat behind a massive desk of dark wood, his posture relaxed but his presence commanding the room. Around him stood 5 men, all Korean, all wearing variations of expensive suits and dangerous expressions. They weren't discussing business in the conventional sense. This was strategy, territory, power. The Zhao family thinks they can move product through our district without tribute, one man said, his tone sharp with anger. We should send a message. No. Min Jae's single word cut through the suggestion like a blade. We send accountants, not soldiers. Calculate what they owe. Present the bill. Give them 24 hours to pay. And if they refuse, then we remind them why this city belongs to those who honor their debts. Min Jae leaned forward, his eyes hard as obsidian. But we do it cleanly. No civilian casualties. No collateral damage. No one gets hurt who isn't part of the game. Is that understood? The men nodded, a chorus of respect and obedience. Boss, another man spoke up, younger, with a scar running down his neck. What about the girl? The one you brought? Is under my protection, Min Jae interrupted, his voice dropping to something colder, more absolute. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Spread the word, she is family now. Treat her accordingly. Zuri's breath caught. Family. Not property. Not possession. Family. There's honor in what we do, Min Jae continued, addressing the room. We're not common thugs. We protect our territory, we honor our agreements, we take care of our own. The moment we forget that, we become the very thing we despise. He stood, and every man in the room straightened instinctively. This empire was built on blood and loyalty. Let's not disgrace either. The meeting dissolved, men filing out with bows and murmured acknowledgments. Zuri pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, as they passed without noticing her. When silence returned, she understood something fundamental had shifted in her perception. Min Jae wasn't a savior. He was a criminal, a man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear. But he ruled with a code, and in a world that had shown her nothing but chaos and cruelty, that code felt like the closest thing to justice she'd ever known. Zuri found the blueprints by accident. She'd been exploring the penthouse during one of Min Jae's absences, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floors. The space was a labyrinth of luxury, rooms that seemed to serve no purpose except to exist, hallways that curved unexpectedly, doors that led to spaces within spaces. A fortress disguised as a home. The library was her favorite discovery, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in Korean, English, and languages she couldn't identify. Leather-bound volumes on philosophy sat beside modern thrillers. Business texts neighbored poetry. It was the room of someone who consumed knowledge like other men consumed alcohol. She was reaching for a book on architecture when her fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A folder, thin and unmarked, wedged between two heavy volumes. Curiosity won over caution. She pulled it free and opened it on the mahogany reading table. Blueprints. Architectural drawings rendered in precise blue lines against white paper. But these weren't decorative. They were functional, detailed, marked with annotations in both Korean and English. Floor plans for all 3 levels of the penthouse. Electrical systems, ventilation shafts, emergency exits, and hidden passages. Zuri's finger traced a line that ran behind the master bedroom wall, a narrow corridor that didn't appear on the main floor plan. Another passage connected the kitchen to what looked like a panic room. A third ran vertically through all 3 floors, accessible through a bookshelf in this very library. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress with secrets, with escape routes and hiding places built into its bones. Min Jae had designed it, or commissioned it, to be impenetrable from the outside but navigable from within for those who knew its secrets. She spent the next hour memorizing the way the ventilation system connected each room, the locations of the hidden doors, the emergency stairwell that bypassed the main elevator. She traced the lines with her fingers until they burned into her memory, until she could close her eyes and see the penthouse's skeleton beneath its polished skin. Interesting reading? Zuri spun around, heart hammering. Min Jae stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, not anger but curiosity. Assessment. I'm sorry, Zuri stammered, moving to close the folder. I didn't mean to. Keep it. She froze. Keep it, Min Jae repeated, pushing off the door frame and walking toward her. Study it. Learn every passage, every exit, every blind spot. He stopped beside the table, looking down at the blueprints with something almost like approval. In my world, knowledge is survival. And you live in my world now. He tapped the folder with one finger. Know the veins of your home, Zuri. You never know when you'll need to disappear. Then he walked away, leaving her alone with the map to her gilded fortress. And the growing realization that Min-jae was teaching her not just to survive, but to fight. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the rain-soaked alley. Zuri was in the kitchen learning to brew proper Korean tea from Min-jae's housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, when one of the guards, a broad-shouldered man named Jae-sung, appeared in the doorway. "Miss Amani," he said, his English carefully pronounced. "You have a visitor downstairs. Your mother." The teacup slipped from Zuri's fingers, shattering against the granite counter. Mrs. Choi muttered something in Korean and reached for a towel, but Zuri barely noticed. Her entire body had gone cold, her breath shallow, her vision narrowing to a pinpoint. "Mireya, here." The nightmare reaching across the glass and steel to drag her back into darkness. "Mr. Kong said you don't have to see her," Jae-sung continued, his voice gentle despite his intimidating frame. "We can send her away. Your choice." Zuri's hands trembled. Every instinct screamed to hide, to lock herself in her room, to let these men handle the monster who'd raised her. But something else whispered beneath the fear. Something newer, sharper, born from studying blueprints and watching Min-jae command his empire. "No," Zuri heard herself say. "I'll see her." Jae-sung nodded, respect flickering across his face. "We'll be right there with you." The lobby was all marble and intimidation, designed to make visitors feel small. Mireya stood in the center like a stain on polished stone, her cheap coat and scuffed shoes incongruous against the luxury. But her eyes, those eyes still burned with the same venomous rage Zuri had known her entire life. "There she is," Mireya sneered as Zuri emerged from the elevator, flanked by 2 guards. "Living like a queen while I'm struggling to pay rent." Zuri said nothing, just stood there, shoulders straight, no longer hunched in submission. "That man gave you 50,000, Mireya continued, her voice rising. "I know you got more up there. Jewelry, cash, whatever he's giving you for spreading your—" "Careful." Jae-sung's voice was quiet but absolute. "Finish that sentence, and you leave in an ambulance." Mireya's mouth snapped shut, but her glare could have melted steel. She turned back to Zuri. "You owe me. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. You owe me, and I want another 50,000. Call it back payment." The old Zuri would have trembled, would have apologized, would have somehow made herself smaller, tried to appease the unappeasable. But Zuri had spent 2 weeks learning the veins of a fortress, watching a king rule his concrete jungle, understanding that power wasn't always violence. Sometimes it was simply refusing to break. She looked her mother in the eye without flinching. "No." One word. Simple. Final. Mireya's face contorted. "You ungrateful little." "The debt is paid," Zuri continued, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "You took his money. You made your choice. Now leave." "You can't." "She can," Jae-sung interrupted. "And you're trespassing. Leave now or we make you leave." Mireya stared at Zuri, searching for the frightened girl she'd terrorized. But that girl was gone, buried beneath blueprints and rooibos tea and the quiet certainty that she didn't kneel anymore. Not for anyone. Mireya spat on the marble and stormed out, her curses echoing off glass walls. Zuri stood tall, watching her disappear, and didn't shed a single tear. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a building that overlooked the harbor, where ships moved like glowing insects across black water. Min-jae had invited Zuri to join him, not as decoration, he'd explained, but because you need to understand how this world works. She wore a dress Mrs. Choi had selected, deep emerald that complemented her skin, simple but elegant. Her braids had been redone, pulled back to reveal the face she was slowly learning to claim as her own. The private dining room held 8 people. Min-jae at the head of the table, his inner circle flanking him, and Zuri seated to his right, a position of honor she hadn't expected. The conversation flowed in a mixture of Korean and English, discussions of shipping routes and territory agreements that sounded almost legitimate until you listened closely. "The West District expansion is complete," one man reported. "The Zhao family accepted our terms." Min-jae nodded, lifting his glass of whiskey. "Then we toast to profitable partnerships." Crystal clinked against crystal. Zuri was reaching for her water when she noticed the waiter. Something about him was wrong. His movements too precise, too controlled. His eyes scanning the room not with service, but with calculation. And when he approached Min-jae's side to refill his glass, His other hand drifted toward his jacket. Gun! Zuri's voice cracked through the room. Everything happened at once. The waiter's hand emerged with black metal. Jae-sung lunged across the table. Min-jae twisted sideways, his chair crashing backward. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet meant for Min-jae's skull, instead shattering the window behind him. Glass exploded inward as two more men crashed through from the fire escape, weapons drawn. The dining room erupted into chaos. Min-jae's men returned fire, the sharp crack of pistols mixing with shouting in Korean. Zuri dove beneath the table, her heart hammering against her ribs, her newly found courage evaporating into pure survival instinct. A body hit the floor beside her. One of the attackers, blood pooling beneath him. Hands grabbed her shoulders. She almost screamed before recognizing Min-jae's face, his jaw set in controlled fury. With me. Now. He pulled her toward the kitchen exit, his own weapon drawn, Jae-sung covering their retreat. Behind them, the firefight continued, the elegant restaurant transforming into a war zone. They burst through the kitchen doors into a service corridor, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Min-jae checked the hallway, his breathing controlled despite the adrenaline, then looked at Zuri. You saved my life, he said quietly. She was shaking, her dress spotted with someone else's blood, her ears ringing from gunfire. I just saw. You saw what my own men missed. He gripped her shoulder, his eyes intense. That instinct, that awareness, don't ever lose it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Min-jae's expression hardened. The war has started, and you're in it now, whether we want it or not. Blood had been spilled, and in Min-jae's world, blood always demanded an answer. The attack came at 2:47 a.m. Zuri woke to darkness, not the natural darkness of night, but the absolute void that comes when every light, every screen, every glowing indicator dies at once. The power was out. Completely. Even the emergency backups. Then she heard the gunfire. Muffled pops from somewhere below, followed by shouting in Korean. Her door burst open and Jae-sung appeared, illuminated only by the tactical flashlight mounted on his weapon. Get up. Now. They've breached the lower level. Zuri's training kicked in before her fear could paralyze her. She rolled out of bed, already dressed. Min-jae had insisted she sleep in clothes that allowed movement after the restaurant attack. Where's Min-jae? Main security room. Pinned down. We need to get you to the panic room. An explosion rocked the building. The windows rattled. Somewhere, glass shattered. They're coming up the main stairwell, Jae-sung said into his radio, his voice tight. Elevator shaft 2. We're cut off. Zuri's mind flashed to the blueprints. The hidden passages. The veins of the fortress she'd memorized. The ventilation shaft, she said. Behind the library bookshelf. It runs all 3 floors. Jae-sung stared at her. How do you? I know this place. Every passage, every exit. She grabbed his arm. I can get to Min-jae. Where exactly is he? Northwest corner, 2nd floor. Security hub. But. Then follow me. She ran, her bare feet silent on the hardwood, Jae-sung's heavy boots thundering behind her. The penthouse had become a maze of shadows, each corner potentially holding death. Gunfire echoed from multiple directions now. The attackers were inside, moving through the main corridors while Min-jae's men fought a desperate defense. The library bookshelf stood innocuous in the darkness. Zuri's hands found the hidden latch, 3rd shelf, behind the Korean poetry collection, and pulled. The bookshelf swung inward with a whisper of well-oiled hinges. Jesus, Jae-sung muttered. The passage beyond was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Metal rungs built into the wall descended into blackness. Zuri grabbed Jae-sung's flashlight and started down, her heart hammering but her hands steady. The shaft smelled of dust and ventilation. She counted the rungs, 12 to the 2nd floor, just like the blueprints showed. At the bottom, another hidden door, this one opening behind a false panel in the corridor outside the security hub. She could hear them now. Heavy breathing. The click of weapons being reloaded. Min-jae's voice, calm despite the circumstances. They want me alive. Use that. Make them hesitate. Zuri pushed the panel open. The security hub was a fortress within a fortress, reinforced walls, multiple monitors now dark, and Min-jae crouched behind an overturned desk with 2 of his men, weapons trained on the barricaded door that shuddered under sustained assault. He turned at the sound of the panel opening, shock flashing across his face. You memorized the blueprints, he said. Every passage, Zuri confirmed. Now let's get you out of here. The door wouldn't hold much longer. Wood splintered with each impact, hinges groaning under the assault. Min-jae's men fired controlled bursts through the gaps, buying seconds that felt like borrowed time. The air reeked of gunpowder and sweat. The passage is narrow, Zuri said, her voice cutting through the chaos. 2 at a time, maximum. We go now or we don't go at all. Min-jae assessed her with those dark, calculating eyes, the same eyes that had stopped her mother's hand in a rain-soaked alley. She saw the moment he made his decision, the shift from protector to partner. Jae-sung, you're with me. The rest hold this position for 60 seconds, then fall back to rally point alpha. He looked at his men, and something unspoken passed between them. Orders that didn't need words. Move! Zuri led them into the passage, Jae-sung's bulk barely fitting through the opening. The flashlight beam cut through darkness as they climbed, her hands finding holds she'd only seen on paper, but now knew like her own heartbeat. Behind them, gunfire intensified, the final stand buying their escape. Left at the junction, she called back. Ventilation runs horizontal here. They crawled through a shaft meant for airflow, not people. Metal groaned under their weight. Zuri's shoulders scraped against the sides, her breath coming in controlled gasps. Behind her, she heard Min-jae moving with the efficiency of someone who'd navigated worse terrain, and behind him, Jae-sung cursing softly in Korean. An explosion rocked the building. The shaft trembled. They're using grenades, Min-jae said, his voice tight. They're not taking prisoners anymore. Almost there. Zuri's fingers found the access panel she'd memorized. This opens into the master bedroom. 3 meters dropped to the floor. She kicked the grate free. It clattered onto expensive hardwood. She squeezed through the opening and dropped, her knees absorbing the impact, rolling sideways just as Min-jae had taught her during their brief defensive training sessions. Min-jae followed, landing with predatory grace. Jae-sung came last, hitting the floor with a grunt. Now what? Jae-sung asked. Zuri was already moving to the closet, pulling aside suits to reveal another hidden panel. Service elevator. Bypasses the main shaft. Goes straight to the underground garage. Min-jae actually smiled, a brief, genuine expression that transformed his face. You're full of surprises. You told me to know the veins of my home. She met his eyes. I listened. The service elevator was cramped, designed for maintenance and emergencies. As it descended, the sounds of the siege faded, replaced by the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. When the doors opened onto the garage, Min-jae's backup team was already there, weapons ready, vehicles running. Boss, one of them said, relief evident. You thought wrong. Min-jae stepped out, his composure returning like armor. Then he turned back to Zuri, still standing in the elevator, her bare feet dirty, her clothes disheveled, her eyes bright with adrenaline. You're not a liability, he said quietly. You're an asset. My best one. Zuri stepped into the garage, shoulders straight, no longer the girl who knelt in alleys. Then let's finish this. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Min-jae let word spread through the city's underworld that the penthouse siege had broken him, that he'd fled to a safe house in the industrial district, that the Korean boss who'd ruled with an iron fist was now vulnerable, wounded, running scared. The rival syndicate, the Chun family, who'd been circling his territory like sharks scenting blood, took the bait. They came in force. 20 men, armed with military-grade weapons, converging on the abandoned warehouse that Min-jae had supposedly chosen as his hideout. They moved with the confidence of predators closing in on wounded prey. What they didn't know was that Zuri had spent 3 days studying the warehouse blueprints with the same intensity she'd applied to the penthouse. Every entrance, every exit, every blind spot and kill zone. And Min-jae's entire organization was waiting. From her position on the catwalk above, Zuri watched through night vision binoculars as the Chun soldiers entered the main floor. Min-jae stood in the center, deliberately visible under a single flickering light, appearing alone and exposed. Now! Jae-sung whispered beside her, his finger on the radio trigger. Wait, Zuri breathed. Let them commit. She'd learned this from watching Min-jae. Patience was a weapon sharper than any blade. The Chun soldiers fanned out, surrounding their target, cutting off retreat routes, moving with tactical precision. Perfect. Now, Zuri said. Jae-sung keyed the radio. Execute. The warehouse exploded into controlled chaos. Lights blazed to life, blinding the attackers. Min-jae's men emerged from concealed positions, behind crates, above on catwalks, through doors that had seemed sealed. Not to kill, but to capture. Rubber bullets and net guns, tranquilizer darts and tactical takedowns. Min-jae had been clear. We're not savages. We're sovereigns. We prove our superiority without unnecessary bloodshed. Within 90 seconds, it was over. The Chun soldiers lay subdued, disarmed, surrounded by Min-jae's forces. Their leader, a scarred man named Chun Wei, knelt in the center, zip-tied and furious. Min-jae approached him slowly, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. You made a mistake. You believed the rumors without questioning them. You attacked my home, threatened my family, and thought I'd simply run. This isn't over, Chun Wei spat. It is. Min-jae crouched down, eye level with the defeated man. But I'm going to give you something you didn't give me, Mercy. Take your men. Leave this city. If I ever see you again, the next trap won't be so gentle. He stood, nodding to his men. They cut the restraints, allowing the Chun soldiers to limp toward the exits, humiliated but alive. When the warehouse emptied, Min-jae looked up at the catwalk where Zuri stood. She descended the metal stairs, her movements confident, no trace of the trembling girl from the alley. When she reached him, he extended his hand, not to lead her, but to stand beside her. The city will talk, he said quietly. Let them. Zuri took his hand. Let them know we're not just surviving. We're ruling. They walked out together into the neon-drenched night, two shadows who'd found sovereignty in each other. The concrete jungle had new monarchs, and they answered to no one.